Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again. To those outside the hall, we strongly recommend you assume your seats as we will be beginning with our next keynote session. For our next keynote session, we have invited Professor Guy Standing. He is a professorial research associate at SOAS University of London and a founding member and honorary co-president of the Basic Income Earth Network. Professor Standing is a labor economist and best-selling author, most notably coining the term precariat in The Precariat, the New Dangerous Class. He has served as an advisor to many governments and international bodies, including as economic advisor in the Prime Minister's Department of Malaysia in the 1980s. In this session, titled A Longer Life, A Fairer Future, Is It Possible?, he will delve into the deepening tensions between rising longevity, changing job landscapes, and widening inequality. Drawing on his decades of research in labor precarity and economic justice, Professor Standing will unpack why many workers, especially those in informal jobs and unpaid care work, are without a safety net, and offer bold, forward-thinking ideas to reimagine income security. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Guy Standing.
I feel a little bit strange as the majority of the audience are still probably queuing for coffee, and therefore I feel I'm not talking to as many people as I was hoping. But I'm delighted to be back in Malaysia. I worked, as has just been mentioned, as an economic advisor in the Prime Minister's Department, and I remember that after a very heavy working period where I'd designed and conducted a big survey of enterprises across Malaysia, that the Director General of the PMU arranged for me to go to Kelantan for a few days holiday. And he arranged that I went to the Pantai Cinta Berahi. And as you all know, that means the beach of passionate love. I was extremely disappointed when I came back and I found that it's been renamed as the Pantai Cahaya Bulan. In other words, Moonlight Beach. I would like to recommend to the government that they restore the original name, because I believe we need more Pantai Cinta Berahi to increase our life expectancy and healthy life. That's by way of introduction. I would like to say that this conference deserves a lot of credit for being forward-looking and being ambitious in doing so. So many conferences these days are agonizing over the recent past or the current period, when in what you're trying to do is looking forward. And in my work over the last 30 years, I've been trying to do precisely that. I will come to that in a few minutes. I want to start by saying that we live in an era of paradoxes. The paradox that most relates to our discussions today is that we have the medical ability to live much longer, yet there is rising morbidity in the world. Many more people are suffering from ill health, including in the richest countries, and many early deaths are taking place. We have a rising need for pensions, but a declining ability to pay for them, or so it seems. We have more food produced in the world today than at any time in history per capita, and yet we have rising food insecurity in many, many countries, including some of the wealthiest in the world. We have higher average incomes than at any time in history, yet rising poverty rates in many, many countries. There was supposed to be a peace dividend at the end of the Cold War, yet here we are in an era of genocides of the most disgusting levels, as we know, and forever wars that never seem to stop. So we have to be careful when we talk about longevity and living to 100, because we're living in a time when many, many, many millions are facing the opposite. We are also living in an era of what I've called rentier capitalism. I've written a book called The Corruption of Capitalism. I wanted to call it rentier capitalism, but my publisher said, no one will understand rentier capitalism. You're talking about corruption. I said, no. In actual fact, people are claiming that they are advancing free market economies, yet in fact we have the most unfree market economy that's ever existed. And more of the income, wealth, and power are going to the owners of property. Physical property, financial property, and intellectual property. And less of the income being generated in any growth scenario I've seen are going to those who perform labor and work. Notice I used the two words labor and work, because in my work I've tried to differentiate between the two. The last paradox I want to mention, and there are others, is that there is more information available than ever in history, yet less knowledge about our cultures, about our history, about our values. Education has been perverted into a human capital process. I'm a professor, and I've just written a book on the education commons, and I was trying to justify writing such a book. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I said, how can I write a preface about this book? And I said, well, I've been a professor at a number of universities, and I must have given a lot of talks at universities, and I stopped counting, counting sheep, counting universities, fell asleep. The next morning I woke up and I calculated that after the last 10 years, I've given lectures, invited lectures at 153 universities in 48 countries. That doesn't happen very often, I'm glad to say, but I can tell you that the malaise that I'm about to talk about is global. Whether I go to Sweden, whether I go to the United States, go to Japan, go to China, I find the same phenomena and the same stories and worries. The global decline in the share of income going to those who perform labor and work is actually underestimated, but I'll leave that aside for the moment. Now, rentier capitalism has generated a new global class structure. Class still matters. You don't have to be a Marxist or a Weberian sociologist to know that class matters. We have a plutocracy at the top, a plutocracy of disgustingly affluent people who make more money in a day than 3/4 of the world make in their whole life. Those plutocrats have now taken over the United States. They're moving their money and their power elsewhere. Below them is an elite serving them and a salariat who is having pensions, paid holidays, paid this, paid medical leave, all the trappings, access to the stock markets. More and more of their income is coming from outside the labor market. And below them is a new mass class, the precariat. I wrote the book, The Precariat, the New Dangerous Class, in 2011. It's been translated into 25 languages, including Chinese, unfortunately not Malay, and it's gone into many editions. Every single day, I receive emails from people around the world, including some from Malaysia, including many from Scandinavia, the United States, and all over, China most of all probably, saying, I am a member of the precariat, and the politicians are not taking any notice of us, as if we don't exist. New estimates suggest that possibly a third or more of the adults in many countries are now part of the precariat. Well, what is it? You can define the precariat in 3 dimensions. First of all, they're exposed to a life of unstable, insecure labor. That instability is existentially threatening. But in addition to that, they have to do a lot of work for labor, work for the state, work for reproduction, work for retraining. It's all work, it's not leisure, but none of that is treated as work. But if they don't do it, they pay a heavy price. And this is the first mass class in history, all over the world, whose modal level of education, formal schooling, is above the level that they need to perform the jobs they're likely to obtain.